Coming up, shortcomings exposed for protecting heritage buildings in Ipswich. Also, during the November meeting of the Growth, Infrastructure and Waste Committee, councillors heard about Indigenous cultural sensitivities around proposed development at Deebing Heights. And it's time to enter Ipswich City Council's annual Christmas lights competition. It's Wednesday, November 16, 2022, and I'm Alan Roebuck. Welcome to Ipswich Today, which acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which it is produced and pays respects to elders past, present and emerging. This podcast is supported by Kinetics, people-powered web hosting trusted by Australian businesses since 1999. Any talk of removing heritage buildings in Ipswich always evokes an emotional response. During November's Growth, Infrastructure and Waste Committee, councillors received a report which will help draft the new Ipswich planning scheme. The recent approval to remove Carroll House at Goodna and replace it with a KFC, some would say exposed shortcomings in the existing planning scheme, and the ongoing issues at Deebing Heights brought into sharp focus Indigenous sensitivities surrounding broader development in that area. At this month's committee meeting, Councillor Marnie Doyle put this question to Senior Council Officer Brett Davey.
So firstly, in relation to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage places under option 5, can I just clarify, I note under the 2016 Planning Act, it is actually a requirement that the schemes do now identify recognise, protect and promote the knowledge and culture of Aboriginal people and their connection to the land. Our planning scheme obviously predates 2016. However, we have had some amendments over the years. Do any of our amendments speak to or address provisions around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultural heritage places?
With the current scheme, not specifically. The benefit of the current scheme, though, is there was effort made to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander places in the heritage registers or the schedules of the scheme, so there is some protection afforded there. So by default, in a way, we'd complied with those provisions. Certainly with the new scheme, we need to further those provisions to make sure that the scheme does comply with the legislation and recognise, most importantly, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander interests. There is still some work to be done there, though, and I feel that in that space we do need to make some considered effort with a future amendment of the draft scheme to actually properly engage with the native title organisations and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to understand the values that we want to incorporate into the scheme and maybe get a better understanding of assets and sites that are of significance, because I understand there have been previous efforts made to identify further sites for the scheme, but that hasn't been successful. But again, it hasn't been addressed for quite a long time in a considered way, and now we have a new Indigenous Accord. There's a lot of work on building a relationship with council and those groups. I think the time is coming for us to spend some effort on that.
Councillor Doyle asked Brett Davey, was it feasible to make amendments to the current planning scheme?
I would suggest that to do an amendment to the current scheme wouldn't bring controls in too much faster than actually doing a considered engagement program with the new scheme. The other benefit we have at the moment is if we move through to engagement phase on the current draft planning scheme, there is an opportunity for these issues to be further explored and submissions made by the community on elements that may be omitted or improvements that can be further made. We could, of course, fund an exercise to amend the scheme, but I would estimate you're talking probably, to do it properly, in the order of 1 to 2 years for this type of exercise. So theoretically, that doesn't come in until 2024. Planning scheme comes into 2024 as well. We'd then have a new scheme that doesn't deal with the matters in the same way that an amended current scheme would. So I would suggest you are better off for longevity and to do it properly to schedule it with the new scheme.
In what amounted to detailed questioning, Councillor Doyle also raised the issue of protecting heritage buildings.
I just want to clarify the final paragraph. You say it's really important to note that there is no immediate way to protect a building from demolition or removal if it is not already protected in a planning policy or by legislation. If we were to, under our existing scheme, add a property to Schedule 2 or 3, is that suggesting we can't, or that there's no retrospective protection?
So there are two scenarios at play. So if you've got a property that's of significance but it's not listed in any register, whether it's state or local, there really isn't an easy way to protect it quickly. To protect that property, you would need to do a temporary local planning instrument, which would take some time, and then that would bring it into a Schedule 2 or a Schedule 3 and offer it some protection. You would take however long it would take to actually get that temporary local planning instrument in place, and then in that time it could have been demolished if there was a willing party to remove that property before we got the controls in place. If it's already in a register, then our powers are stronger. There are provisions under the Heritage Act, for example, to allow councils to go and take action and give direction notices to improve properties, but it doesn't necessarily prevent that neglect, or even it doesn't necessarily prevent the demolition of that property. It gives us actions to be able to take if those properties are wantonly demolished without seeking approvals.
And so my next question was around demolition by neglect, which is the concept known whereby an owner of a property intentionally or not neglects the property. We see a lot of senior residents, I guess, the home falls into disrepair and they don't have the financial means to undertake the required repairs. But very separately to that, I'd like to think it doesn't happen often, but there are examples of where it's intentionally done, potentially by a developer. And when we think about what protection, what levers we can pull, I know at both state and local level, we have our Planning Act, our planning scheme and our Queensland Heritage legislation, but that only takes us so far. We are relying to a certain extent on the owners of the property to also do the right thing. But if we turn our mind to the levers we can pull, I am aware several years ago the ability for a local government to issue a notice of maintenance or repair. Amendments were made. Is that correct? And do we do that here at Ipswich City Council? Have we done that? What does that look like?
Yeah, there were amendments made to the Heritage Act to afford similar powers to councils as is afforded to the state in being able to give a direction notice essentially to an owner and suggest they need to do rectification works to a premises. To my knowledge, we've never used those provisions. I'm certain it's been discussed internally and thinking it through. Certainly it's an option that's available to us. I don't think it's very frequently used at a state level either. You're right, most of the properties and the stock we have are privately owned, and so in the circumstances that you would use that, you're issuing a notice to a property owner that may or may not have the capacity to address those issues. And then you've got to ask yourself the question, once you start down that path, how far do you pursue that? Do you continue to the point of taking legal action against the property owner for not maintaining their property appropriately? So we spend quite a bit of time in a reactive way with our Heritage Advisor program to be able to help people understand some of the opportunities that arise from owning character properties and their ability to maintain them. But we are mindful that not everyone has the capacity to do it or the capability. People don't understand when they buy a character home that the beauty of it requires that constant vigilance. And if they're unaware and they're not handy themselves, they'll often inadvertently do things that damage the property.
It's beginning to look like and feel like Christmas. The Ipswich Christmas Lights competition is underway. Free entries for the competition close November 28, and entrants can win a share of over $8,000 worth of cash and prizes. Categories include Best Residential, Best Business or Organisation, Best Street, People's Choice, and Best New Entry. For tips and tricks for making your own suburban light wonderland, as well as more information about the competition, visit christmasinipswich.com.au. Online voting will be open between December 1 and 5. There'll also be a full list of addresses you can vote for soon on christmasinipswich.com.au. And the giant Christmas tree in Darcy Doyle Place is a must-see when its lights are switched on at 6:45pm on Friday, November 25. And as usual, a reminder to look for handy links in the show notes. Ipswich Today is supported by Kinetics, people-powered web hosting trusted by Australian businesses since 1999. This podcast is also listener-supported. Please make a once-only gift or regular donation to help keep it online. Just go to ipswichtoday.com.au and click the donate button on the homepage to make a payment through PayPal. Follow and stream this podcast from your favourite app, including iHeartRadio and Amazon Music, or play Ipswich Today on smart speakers. Music is supplied by Purple Planet Music. This is Alan Roebuck. Thank you for listening.